welcome to This World. My name is Vikram Chandra and I'm really excited to bring you this special episode of This World where our focus tonight is on artificial intelligence or AI. And we have a couple of really big guests for you in just a couple of minutes. Nick Bostrom and Pedro Domingos. They are the people who have written two of the most influential books on AI. Both of them have really changed the way people think about AI, and both of them are going to be joining us right here on this episode of This World. But before I actually start introducing the guests or talking about them, why should you care about any of this? Let me tell you, what did you spend your day thinking about today? I guess many of us would have spent our day thinking about cricket matches and what our friends are doing, and maybe the drama that's happening in politics or what's happening in parliament, or, all of those are the things that really occupy us from a day-to-day basis. But what's really important? What do many of you think is really important? What should you spend your life worrying about? What are the sort of things? Our jobs, our children's education, the state of the world, future, the future of ill health, the future of how traffic will work, what will happen to climate change, all of those questions. And by the way, all of those questions could be answered by AI. The world is changing very fast around us. We are at an inflection point in human history. And as with many other inflection points, we don't necessarily pay too much attention to it when it's actually happening. We're too distracted by other things. Do you remember when you first heard about the internet or about mobile phones? Perhaps you didn't pay too much attention. But life was never the same again. And it's going to happen now, it's going to happen again, and it's going to happen with AI. This week, GPT-4 was launched. If ChatGPT was dramatic enough, we now have an even more advanced model. 3 months ago, we thought the world had changed. Now, an even more advanced model. And some believe that this is coming for your job. GPT-4 could double up as a lawyer, as a chartered accountant, a sous chef. It can code. It can ace exams. It can even understand Telugu, Punjabi, and Bengali. It can make a business plan for you. It can run your business and tell you how to do it. It can make PowerPoints for us. Is this an AI apocalypse that is coming for your jobs? Or is our life about to get really smooth? We're going to be finding out today with two really special guests. And let me just give you a little bit of a personal aside or insight into this. Many years ago when I began to get interested in AI, I found two books. Here they are. They haven't left my side for 6 years now. Both of them have incidentally been recommended by Bill Gates and by many other experts. The Master Algorithm by Pedro Domingos describes the quest for the ultimate learning machine. It explains the entire concept of machine learning and how machine learning and machines learning to improve themselves could change the entire world. And then you have this book, Super Intelligence by Nick Bostrom, which explains the existential risks that AI could pose to humans. How intelligence could become super intelligent and then potentially wipe out all of mankind. I'm very happy to tell you that both Nick Bostrom and Pedro Domingos are going to be joining us right here on this episode of This World, so don't even think of going away. This is actually truly a big moment for me. Before I go to either Nick Bostrom or Pedro Domingos, let me just talk about GPT-4 for a couple of moments. The interesting thing about all technology, and especially something like AI, is the speed at which it gets better. So there was AI. And then, remember November and December? You suddenly had ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT was built on something called GPT 3.5. And it was considered revolutionary. I've spent 3 months talking to you and saying, oh my God, the world is changing. And then, look what happens this week. The makers of ChatGPT, OpenAI, have come up with a model that's even more advanced and even more disruptive. ChatGPT was based on GPT 3.5. It was released in November last year. Now, Tuesday, the 14th of March, OpenAI releases GPT-4. The makers are calling it the latest milestone in OpenAI's efforts in scaling up deep learning. It sounds flat. So what is GPT all about? And more importantly, what are some of the things that people have already started doing with it in just 2 days, the things that people are doing with it? Now, what's unique about GPT-4 is that, number one, the platform is multimodal. Means it doesn't only accept text inputs, but also images. For example, you can upload a photograph or a diagram or a screenshot and ask GPT to describe it or solve a mystery. The makers tested the model by uploading these photos on GPT-4 and asked it to point out what was funny in these images. GPT-4 did not disappoint. It replied saying, the humor in this image comes from the absurdity of plugging a large, outdated VGA connector into small, modern smartphone charging ports. GPT-4 was on point. And all of this, by the way, just illustrates how ridiculous it is that we are still trying to prevent robots from getting onto something saying, CAPTCHA, can you interpret this image? Look what GPT-4 can do. But it goes on. GPT-4 has the ability to process up to 25,000 words, which is around 8 times more than ChatGPT. Also, GPT-4 can turn your ideas into reality. This engineer, for example, uploaded a handwritten note of a dummy website that he wanted to create. GPT-4 turned it into a legit website there and then. He then uploaded the photos of a few ingredients, flour, egg, butter, and asked GPT-4, what can you make with these ingredients? Look at GPT-4's reply, pancakes or waffles, crepes, French toast, omelets. It then goes on to give other recipe ideas, adding, these are just a few examples, but the possibilities are endless. But that is just the starting point. In the last 2 or 3 days, the things that people have done with it, well, here is one of the threads that, for example, breaks it down to you. I want to give you just a few examples. Like we showed you, you can turn your scribbles into apps and websites. That famous example of, I wrote something on a napkin and then I had to program it. Write something on a napkin, GPT-4 can convert it into a website for you. Here's another practical example of what somebody did. You can ask GPT-4 to build a video game for you, and voila, you no longer need a coder. Take a look at this. GPT-4 built a Pong game in minutes. You can use GPT-4 to add context to your story. Say you're struggling with the caption of your next Instagram post. Upload the photo in GPT-4. Ask it to describe the photo for you. It's going to oblige. Something else that you can do. Ask GPT-4 to type a lawsuit for you, like this man did. A telemarketer calling you up, instant lawsuit in less than a few seconds, and it can go to the person. Well, you're basically saving legal costs out here. But then again, of course, none of this is foolproof, so you may want to pay someone to proofread it once for you. You can also ask GPT-4 to help you with daily chores, like coming up with party ideas or helping you write a letter, a resume, a covering letter, anything. You see, the possibilities are essentially endless. You just need to start exploring this and figuring out the best way that you can do it. And sometimes, as in my case, I actually asked GPT-4, how do I use you to help me with ABC? And it did it. It did it in a matter of seconds. But for me, some of the most fascinating examples have been even more open-ended than that. Many people have said that, oh, all these generative models and these large language models like GPT are essentially just autocomplete on steroids. It's just completing stuff, doesn't really have any intelligence. But some people have been doing things that are way more open-ended. There's a famous example, many such examples actually, running on Hustle GPT. They're calling it Hustle GPT, where people are saying, here you are, GPT-4, I have $100. Help me make this into a business. And GPT-4 is doing everything, coming up with the idea, coming up with how to market it, coming up with the logo, coming up with what they should do next. Everything is being done by GPT-4. And this is really making people think. You're now moving more and more towards human-level intelligence and human-level performance. OpenAI, by the way, actually believes that this platform exhibits human-level performance on various professional and academic benchmarks. GPT-4, for example, has taken language tests. It scored 85.5% in English, 73.2% in Bengali, 62% in Marathi and Telugu, respectively. OpenAI made GPT-4 take practice papers or a whole range of exams. Look at the results. It got 80th percentile in the GRE quantitative, 99th percentile in GRE verbal. It also passed the bar exam. Earlier this week, OpenAI's chief executive Sam Altman tweeted about GPT-4, saying it's still flawed, still limited, but it still seems more impressive on first use than it does after you spend more time with it. The OpenAI blog makes this point too. It says, and I'm quoting again, despite its capabilities, GPT-4 has similar limitations as earlier GPT models. Most importantly, it is still not fully reliable as it hallucinates facts and makes reasoning errors. It is not perfect. But the big question that you need to keep in mind is this technology, like all other technologies, is getting better with time, and it will continue to do so. Remember what happened with the iPhone, that first phone, the first mobile phone? Compare it with what you have right now. Don't think of what GPT-4 has. Think of what GPT-6 will be like, or GPT-10, or GPT-40. Till then, yes, there will be answers that are misleading. Of course, there will be misinformation. But like every problem out there, in this case also, solutions could follow. Could be sooner, could be later, could be wrong, and perhaps, far from solutions coming up, some big existential problems are going to come up, and I'm going to be talking to you about that in just a couple of minutes. But what I can tell you is this world is changing, and this world is changing forever. So please pay attention to all of this. Meet Aarti Prabhakar. She's the director of the White House's Office of Science and Technology Policy. Earlier this week, she was part of a panel at a conference where she said, and I quote, "What we are all seeing is the emergence of this extremely powerful technology." One of her panelists replied, saying, "If in 6 months you are not completely freaked out, then I will buy you dinner." This co-panelist was Austin Carlson, the founder of Seed AI. World is changing. Pay attention to it. Please do it. How can you, by the way, use GPT-4? Well, for starters, you need to get a premium version. You need to pay for it. Unlike GPT-3, this sort of version requires you to buy tokens or be part of a plus campaign. Each token costs a certain amount of money. That's the starting point. But Microsoft has now said it's building GPT into Word and Excel, which means it's going to be everywhere. Everywhere. And that's another reason you need to think about this and pay serious attention. Because if you're not paying attention, the person next to you could be. And he or she will then have an advantage that you cannot match. This is something that is going to be affecting your education, your work, and your life very, very drastically. But that's the use of AI at a very basic level. How is AI going to affect our lives and our jobs and our education? Well, it's not entirely basic, it's important. But let's welcome the first of our guests, Nick Bostrom, who is the author of this particular book, which I was talking about, Superintelligence, Paths, Dangers, and Strategies, written in 2014. Professor Bostrom, I have to say it's an absolute pleasure to have you joining us. Now, you wrote in 2014 in your book, Superintelligence, that AI could very quickly become more intelligent than humans in a range of manners, and that has its own implications. It could literally replace humans or change them in many ways. When you look at what's happening around us, for starters, how do you see this panning out? We saw ChatGPT and people got very excited. Now we're seeing GPT-4, which seems to be one generation ahead. What is your reaction to what we are seeing in the world of AI right now?
It's very impressive how fast things are unfolding now and over the last few years. We almost forget already AlphaGo, when AI systems could first beat the best human Go player, how impressive that was at the time. Now we hardly even remember it. And then these these image generating models that can produce pictures that look, almost photorealistic, and now that and then I almost forgot, but then there was AlphaFold, right? The system that can predict how protein structures fold up, and now GPT-2, GPT-3, GPT-4, Sydney Bing. It looks like AI is finally coming together, and that there is now a way of doing things that seems to work and generalize. And people are scaling these systems up and find that, the more parameters you add, the more training data you give them, the better they perform.
Okay, Professor Bostrom, as I start coming to you now to talk about superintelligence, I think it would be useful to show the viewers the sort of differences that exist between the different types of intelligence. If I understand your book correctly, there was narrow intelligence, which was it could do one thing in a very limited manner. And then you have AGI, or artificial general intelligence. This is a sort of intelligence that humans have, where you could do a range of things and you can teach yourself from one aspect of data to apply it elsewhere. So that's general intelligence. And then, of course, there is what your book is talking about, which is superintelligence, which is when AI becomes much smarter and smarter on multiple levels than humans?
These systems are quite general. The narrow systems really was the paradigm of so-called good old-fashioned AI, which sort of was the way you did things from the mid-50s onwards to around 2010, 2012, where the best performing AI systems on any one task were carefully handcrafted specifically to do that task. And after that, the paradigm shifted to machine learning, where instead of trying to craft specific algorithms for a particular task, you instead had the machine learn how to do the task by giving it a lot of examples. And then that is the paradigm that then has become more powerful, scaled up. The transformer models have increased the range even further. And now you have these systems that have a general learning ability. It's just that they don't always learn as fast as we humans do. That's why you have to train them on sort of all the text on the internet to achieve GPT-4 levels, whereas no human has read anything approximating all the text on the internet. And we still manage to outperform them in many domains. They're also sort of quite weak on causal reasoning, physical intuition, common sense. Currently, they have no long-term planning ability. And so there are still aspects of human capability that these systems lack. But it's an open question whether either by just continuously scaling them up, you will find that they eventually develop these capabilities too, or if maybe you can use these large transformer models as sort of the engine and then tack on some other modules that might then also give them, say, these more goal-oriented capabilities, let us say, or other specialized capabilities.
All right, Professor Bostrom, I'd now like you to explain one of the reasons why this book of yours has frankly terrified everybody in the AI field for the last 9 years or so. And it's because of one specific thing also that you talk about, which in your book I think you describe as the kinetics of an intelligence explosion. And that essentially means that once AI gets to human level capabilities or general intelligence, it can actually become much more intelligent than humans very, very, very fast. So once it gets to human level intelligence, it doesn't necessarily stay there. It could become 12 times more intelligent, 100 times more intelligent, 1,000,000 times more intelligent, faster than you can snap your fingers. And that's when some really scary possibilities can happen. And this is happening because it's sort of recursively self-improving itself.
Potentially, yeah. I think it is striking to me that a lot of people try to think ahead and they try to be really ambitious with their imagination, and they like imagine if these AIs one day can do everything that we can do, and then what would the impact on the economy be? What would the labor market look like? But many people then take what to me seems like the obvious next step, that if they one day become able to do everything that we can do, then if not the next day, then maybe the next year or a few years later, they'll become super intelligent and be much better than we are at everything. And that would include, in particular, AI research and computer engineering and technology research in general. So at that point, the driving force behind further advances will no longer be humans, and the advances will no longer happen on a human timescale limited by the human ability to observe and think and analyze, but it will happen on machine timescales, which will accelerate then as the AI gets even more advanced. Like they will then maybe be able to push even further and faster on the research frontier.
So if I can try to understand that a little bit further, what you're essentially saying is that once you get to the super intelligent level, you get to the human level, then you can get to super intelligence in a very short period of time. But once it is super intelligent, it means that both the positives and the negatives can actually get exacerbated. So all the problems that worry us as humans, climate change, cancer, medical issues, traffic on the road, air pollution, all of those aren't necessarily problems anymore because the super intelligence will be able to figure it out. That's the good news. But there's a downside too that I want to come to. The downside is that it could potentially wipe us out. But let's start with the upside first.
Yeah, the upsides are absolutely enormous. But But this idea that the transition might go relatively fast. Now, of course, we don't know this because we've never had a machine intelligence explosion, but I think we should at least take these scenarios seriously where this unfolds not over a timescale of decades, but much faster. If you think about specific domains where computers have now surpassed us, let us say chess or Go, the amount of time they spent being roughly equally good as a human was relatively brief. First they were a lot worse than any professional human, and then fairly soon thereafter, they were much better. And there were like maybe a few months or a few years where they were roughly equally good as like world-class humans. And so if we see the same thing with general intelligence, yeah, then we might get this relatively explosive transition to super intelligence. But there are also factors that could slow that down. Like if humans first pick all the low-hanging fruits in AI research, it might just become a lot harder to push the frontier at that stage. And then even if you have super intelligence is doing the research, maybe it still doesn't go fast because the research just becomes increasingly difficult. So we can't be confident that it will be very fast. But yeah, as you said, I think the potential uses of this technology as it matures are almost unlimited. Like basically anything for which human intelligence is useful for. I mean, we use it for everything, like whether it's driving cars or inventing new medicines or producing movies or books or like you name it. All those things, if you had machines that were smarter than us and could learn faster, they could do all of those things much better. And yeah, it goes without saying that for the economy, for entertainment, for science, for medicine, that would be an enormous boon.
All right, I hear that. That's on the positive side. And look, let's now turn to the risk. The risk in your book is that you could have an AI takeover. That's the scary stuff, right? That's Skynet and Ex Machina and all those horrible science fiction movies that we see. I don't know if you've seen this. Elon Musk was tweeting about this, saying the singularity is coming and it's going to be terrible. The possibility there is you go in a very short period of time from general intelligence to super intelligence, and then not because the AI is inherently evil or amoral, it doesn't have morality. Its objective function could just be phrased wrongly, and then something could go wrong. It could take a decision to wipe out humans. It could do something else that potentially destroys the human race. That's the existential risk that I think many people are seriously worried about today.
Increasingly so now, yeah. I mean, when I wrote the book, it was very much a fringe preoccupation, which was the reason for doing it. But yeah, nowadays it's become a very active research field. I mean, in fact, a lot of the smartest people I know now are working on AI alignment, trying to make methods that could scale so that even as an AI becomes smarter and smarter or arbitrarily capable, you would still be able to steer it to get it to do what you intend for it to do. And what is less great about these current large language models that we see in the transformer models is that we are already seeing signs of alignment failures. Like they are not very serious today because the models are very limited in what they can do and we humans are in the control. But despite great efforts by OpenAI and Microsoft and these other labs to get the models never to say output offensive content or sexist content, or like they try quite hard to do that, and so far they have still not succeeded. If you give it certain prompts, the system sort of goes off the rails and start doing this. And so these are big black boxes with billions of parameters, and they respond in various ways to input that are difficult to predict. And we don't yet have a reliable way of making sure that they use this great capability they have specifically and only for the purposes that their designers want them to use it for.
You know, especially because I guess at that point it would realize that the biggest risk to it is humans trying to squeeze it back into the box, to switch it off. And therefore it says I have to protect myself, I have to defend myself. I mean, that at the end of the day is the scenario in every second scary science fiction movie that we've ever seen, from HAL to anything else.
Yeah, so that I think is one of the big areas of concern. And it's a technical problem ultimately, how to develop methods, algorithms, training methods that would make sure that you align, that its goals are actually what we have in mind. Then I think there are two other big areas of challenge that we also will need to manage. So there is what you might call the governance challenge or the political challenge. Like, assuming we solve the technical alignment problem, then how do we make sure that by and large, at least, we humans then use these AI systems for positive purposes rather than waging war against one another or oppressing one another and so forth. So that will be a big challenge for the world. And then there's a third area of challenge as well, which has received less attention. But ultimately, I think what matters is not just what the AIs do to us or what we do to each other using AI tools, but also what we do to the AIs themselves. As these digital minds become increasingly complex and sophisticated, I think they will start to attain degrees of moral status. They might attain sentience, they might have preferences, a conception of self, and there could be scenarios in which we create millions and millions of these to do our bidding, but they themselves maybe suffer or have horrible lives, so we don't treat them the way they deserve to be treated.
I mean, I know that, Professor Bostrom, but these are not moral entities. There's no human morality that is built into any AI system. And frankly, even human morality is not crystal clear. I mean, if you just think it through, all of human literature, let's say you hand it all of human literature, all of human history, what is the morality it's going to build for itself? Because let's face it, humans have been pretty awful to each other for most of mankind. They've been ready to kill each other, torture each other. You can give it a book. You can't even give it a book because you read this book or that book. You'll never be able to agree on what morality should be, what ethics should be. So how are you going to train this into having some sort of an alignment with what humans should want and what a superintelligence will want?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can divide this into two problems. So one is pick any value or goal that any one human has, let's say. Then how would you even get the AI to do that? That's already a very difficult technical challenge at the moment that we don't know how to solve. Then if you could do that, then we have this, what I call the second area of challenge, like how do you then integrate that at the societal level, where you have different people and parties with different views, and you need to come to some sort of understanding or compromise that's on top of that, and you need both of those to go well. Yeah, what I would say though is that ultimately, even if you could design a box without an internet connection and somehow made sure that nobody else built another AI that was connected to the internet, I mean, at some point somebody's obviously going to do that, but unless the AI itself is aligned, I think this would fail sooner or later, probably sooner, because if it is to have any use at all, it needs at least to interact with some human beings, right? If it's just literally a box that never interacts with the world, you might as well not have it in the first place. But human beings are not secure systems. Human beings can be persuaded and manipulated in all kinds of ways. And if you had a superintelligence with access to humans, and then humans with access to the internet, I think it might not be much harder for the AI if it were unaligned to escape than if it had direct access to the internet. I think we almost have to assume that if you have a superintelligence that is unaligned, it will eventually come out. And maybe it's good to do as an extra precaution while you're testing it in the lab. You might not want to immediately give it access to the internet, but the goal here, and I think ultimately what is required for success, is a deeper solution where you designed it from the ground up so that it's actually trying to help us align it rather than be this thing that is working at cross purpose with its designers.
So if I understand you correctly, you are saying that no matter what you try, a super intelligent AI will almost certainly escape. That's a bit scary for me to digest, but you're saying it will digest, especially because you're saying general intelligence will almost certainly become super intelligent, and super intelligence, millions of times more intelligent potentially than humans, will almost certainly escape, and it cannot be tough to get into a cage. If that is the situation that you think we're looking at, it's a somewhat scary situation, because then the only solution is to somehow try and build into it I don't know what you're going to build into it. Something like Asimov's 3 laws of robotics that, you can never harm a human or obey humans or not allow humans to come to terms. Is that the sort of a thing that you have to try and build into it as an alignment?
Yeah, although I think you need something very different and much more sophisticated than Asimov's laws. These were sort of 3 hard-coded, strict rules. I think what you need instead is to leverage these systems' learning ability to learn what it is that we humans want and to be able to reason about that and maybe to ask us clarifying questions. And that's the only way you could even hope to capture the complexity of human values and wishes. And even something that looks very, very simple to us, if you really try to spell it out in computer code, is actually very complex. Like you might say, well, I want as much money as possible in my bank account, let's say. So can you AI help me do that? Well, I mean, what you literally want is not the number in your bank account to be good. You want that to, maybe go up while also remaining alive, while people you care about are alive and happy and are able to decide their own lives, and while not violating the law, and while doing all these other things. And if you try to write down explicit rules that captures all of those conditions, you will quickly realize that that's a completely hopeless task. The only way you could do this would be by sort of the same intelligence that would make the AI dangerous, like to somehow use or target that intelligence to learn and appreciate our values and desires and the implicit context in our request.
No, you're right, because any explicit objective function that you give this could be misinterpreted. You say, for example, make me smile, and it paralyzes your face in a smile, that sort of a thing.
Right, yeah. And then you try to qualify that, make me smile, but not by paralyzing my face, and maybe it sticks an electrode into your brain, or you can. Human values are actually very complex if you try to spell them out in computer code directly. Like it's complex patterns that have to be learned. But I mean, for precisely the same reasons that these systems will become very powerful learners and really smart, they should be able to, if they want to, figure this out, just as we humans, are to some extent able to figure out what we and what other humans want. At least to that degree, the AI should be able to do the same. And then comes the second part of that, which is that they would then need to be actually motivated to pursue those values that it can figure out that we humans hold. And that's where you need some advances in alignment technology to actually figure out how to do that. And we need to get it right on the first try. So, we can experiment with smaller systems, but there are new difficulties that only come into view when you have human level or beyond systems, like the situational awareness, the ability to strategically deceive, to plan ahead. These introduce new failure modes that are not necessarily apparent with very small and limited systems.
All right, Nick Bostrom, the author of Superintelligence: Paths, Dangers, and Strategies. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It was fun.
And from one author who's been particularly influential in the entire AI world to another. Pedro Domingos is the author of The Master Algorithm. This has really helped explain machine learning to a lot of people when he came out with it in 2015. He spoke in his book about 5 different ways of doing machine learning and started to ask, can they all be combined? Can they be taken to build machines that have the ability to teach themselves, learning machines? That essentially is what he wrote about. Look at this picture, for example. This was the Chinese leader Xi Jinping in his famous New Year address. This is in 2018. And he had Pedro Domingos' book, The Master Algorithm, that was behind him right now as he was speaking about it. Thank you so much, Professor Domingos, from joining us. I've often had your book next to me to try and help me understand what learning machines are. You said that we are on the quest for the ultimate learning machine. Do you think that quest is reaching its final destination?
It's not reaching its final destination yet, but it's certainly made very noticeable progress since then. We are clearly closer to having this master algorithm, this universal learning algorithm that can learn on things than we were 5 years ago.
You know, Professor Domingos, when you wrote your book, a lot of people said, how is this ever going to happen? AI is a pie in the sky, and there's not going to be a master algorithm. There'll be no thinking machines. And I think one of the times when people started to pay attention is when Xi Jinping actually gave that New Year address and had your book behind him. What was your reaction when you saw it?
Right. I was both excited and a little worried. So apparently Xi Jinping, during this New Year's address that he gives every year, puts books on his shelf to signal to the party and the people in China and maybe elsewhere as well what's important. And apparently they were looking for a book or two on AI to make the point that AI is really important. And again, they've said this very explicitly, right? In some ways, China, for better or worse, is ahead of many other countries in this. And in a way, it's good because there are enormous good applications that AI can have to make society better, to improve the economy. But there are also some very worrisome applications that an authoritarian regime like China can make of it and is making. So when China gets better at AI, in some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad. It's a mixed bag.
Right. So you're saying that was a signal that an AI arms race was really kicking off, and that you're going to have USA and China and many other countries, and potentially India also coming into that, all trying to get dominance in the field of AI. It's going to be an important battlefield.
There is an arms race in AI. I would say that the US is still ahead, but China is coming up very fast. It's made it's made an enormous amount of progress. It's shrunk the distance a lot in the last 10 to 5 years. Some people would say that in some subfields of AI, it is ahead at this point. We can debate that. But the main thing to realize is that if things go on as they are, within another 5 or 10 years, China will be the world leader in AI, and that will have a lot of economic, political, military consequences. Now, for example, Europe, traditionally along with the US, was also a leader in AI, and it still is a leader in AI research. Not as far along as the US, but to some extent it is one community. But Europe has not been very good at putting AI to work. They're more concerned with AI as a threat, AI as a danger. How do we regulate it? How do we tamp down on it? Whereas the US and China are trying to be the world leader in AI. The European Union, as the European Commissioner says, wants to be the world leader in regulating AI. So maybe it'll succeed.
And what do you think the possibilities are for relatively fresh entrants into this field? I mean, take India, for example. India is also trying very hard to move into the entire AI space. And obviously, there are a lot of very talented engineers out there. So do you think this is going to become a duopoly between the USA and perhaps China? Or do you think countries like India also have a strong chance?
It's wide open. So the very important thing about AI is that it's not like, nuclear power or things that take a very large and expensive technological basis before you can do them. Anybody can start doing AI in their garage. And in fact, one of the reasons why I wrote the master algorithm was try to inspire some kid to invent the master algorithm, which could happen. And by the same standard, you could be in India or in another country today and very quickly come up to the leading edge and start. And there's also so much to do. It's a very broad front. And as you say, India is better placed than many countries, not just because of its size, but because it also has a very large base of well-trained people in technology. So I think it's completely feasible for India to become one of the world leaders in AI within the next decade or so.
Right. Now, if you're talking about a possible arms race between countries in the field of AI, there's also an arms race that seems to be taking place between companies. I mean, take a look at GPT, for example. Microsoft has just acquired or taken a major position in GPT. That may well go down in history as one of the most significant acquisitions or deals of all time. I mean, getting into OpenAI just at the time when all of this was happening, being able to put that into Word and Excel, as we heard announced last night. These are very, very major steps. And then, of course, you've got Google, both headed incidentally by people of Indian origin CEOs. So do you think there's going to be a company's arms race that is also going to be able to taking place right now? And potentially that competition also leads to dangers, as they're trying very fast to get ahead and they ignore some of the dangers that we've been talking about on this program.
Well, there's definitely an arms race between companies. They very much understand that whoever has the best AI has a good chance of dominating the future of information technology. Now, to be fair, Microsoft has not acquired OpenAI. This is actually an interesting point. OpenAI is a small company whose goal initially was actually to be an alternative to the big companies and to have more OpenAI, as the name implies. Now it's not so open anymore. Microsoft has invested in OpenAI, and they have an exclusive deal to use what they produce, which again could be an absolute coup for them. It's ironic because the technology, for example, of GPT was initially developed more at Google than at OpenAI or at Microsoft, but then they were very hesitant about rolling it out for safety concerns, ethical concerns, et cetera, et cetera. And now Microsoft has stolen a march on them. And it's also interesting because Microsoft has been very aggressive about AI in a way that it wasn't 20 years ago. 20 years ago, Microsoft was the leader in AI research and Google was just starting, and Google was the bold new company. Now Microsoft seems to have found a new boldness that it didn't have for a while, maybe because of Satya Nadella as the new CEO. And Google has become very conservative, very risk averse. Having said all that, those are not the only two. They're the two that are most in the media right now, but all the big tech companies, American and Chinese, are investing very heavily in AI. Facebook, Apple, Baidu, Tencent, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just those two. Google, I would say, is still the leader in terms of having the best and the most AI research, but that is by no means secure. And again, in terms of putting into practice, they fumbled. But this is still early in the game. A lot is going to happen in the next year or several years.
All right, Professor Domingos, I'm going to get a little bit technical right now, and do bear with me. After all, we do have with us the man who's literally written the book on finding the ultimate learning machine. So just help us look under the hood a little bit. What is actually happening in the field of AI? Tell us the technicalities of this. In your book, you said there are 5 different methods of doing AI, 5 different tribes, as you like, and then they're going to try and come together. Tell us a little bit about that, and what is GPT actually based on?
Right. So first of all, the important thing to realize about machine learning, which is what powers AI today and what the book is about, and what's made all this progress possible, is that for us today, it's common sense that a computer is a machine that can do just about anything. Right? Think of all the different things that computers do. Back 100 years ago, the idea of a machine that could do 100 different things would be very strange, right? Sewing machines would sew, and etc. But we have to program the machines. If I wanted to play chess, I have to program it to play chess. If I wanted to run a bank, I have to program it to run the ATMs and whatnot. The idea of the master algorithm is that a single algorithm can do an infinity of different things by learning from the appropriate data. That's the thing, is that now we don't have to program the computer. There is one algorithm that programs itself by learning from data, which may sound like a crazy idea, but it's what humans do, right? Children learn by both from their teachers and by playing around. And in essence, what we have now are computers that do the same.
So if I could just try and understand that a little further. Up to a certain point, there were basically computer programs that would be working very narrowly. You had to instruct the computer what to do, write it down, program software and say, do A, B, C, D things. Then it got to a little bit better where it could start figuring things out a little bit more for itself. Google Maps will help you get from point A to point B. And now it's a far more general system of learning that it seems to be doing. Would that be an accurate way of summing it up?
Yes, in fact, we have to distinguish between traditional programming, where you specify step by step what the program is supposed to do. And this is what 99% of the programs in the world today are. Yeah. And then there's traditional AI without machine learning, where it searches for a solution. Like I say, find the shortest route between home and work. And there's an AI program that does the search for that. Now, machine learning is a step beyond that, where it actually figures out what to do just by looking at data. Yeah. Right? So it's more ambitious, and it took a while for it to work, but now it does.
So level 1, a human is actually programming the computer specifically, telling it what to do step by step, code by code. Step number 2, you're giving it broad directions and saying, okay, you've got to get from here to there, and this is how you can probably try and do it. Computer can do certain tasks for itself. And number 3, you're not telling it anything, you're just giving it examples and saying, figure it out for yourself. How do you want to go? This is what we would, these are just some examples. Figure it all out for yourself. And that's perhaps where we are getting to now. so far.
Or to be even more specific, you just give it examples of the inputs and what the corresponding output should be. You're like a teacher, right? You just say, here are the two numbers and here's what the addition of them is, the sum. You figure out how to add them. And if you give it enough examples of this, it'll actually learn how to, add numbers and many other things.
All right, fine. I think we've understood all of that. So now tell us, come back to your 5 tribes and what's happening right now with GPT.
So there are 5 major paradigms in AI, in machine learning, to be more specific. They've been the same since the 50s. This is remarkable. Decade by decade, one or another paradigm is in the lead, but it's always been the same 5. So what are they? They are inspired by different areas of science. For example, the paradigm that's in the lead right now is deep learning, also known as neural networks, which is inspired by the brain. The idea there is we're going to reverse engineer the brain, copy what it does. That's one paradigm. Another paradigm, symbolic AI, is more inspired by what scientists do, right? Scientists discover things, so let's automate the scientific method. Then there's Bayesian machine learning, which is inspired by ideas from statistics, in particular Bayes' theorem. That's what comes from. You have probabilities and you update them and so on. There's genetic algorithms, which are inspired by evolution, right? Evolution produced, all of us, animals and plants. Let's imitate evolution on the computer to produce programs and robots and circuits and whatnot. And finally, there's the analogizers, which are based mainly in psychology. People solve a lot of problems by analogy. I find a similar problem and then I transfer things from one to the other. So these are the main paradigms. And again, who knows which one will be in the lead 10 years from now, but right now it's deep learning.
Okay, look, let me just ask you this question directly. What exactly is happening on these, whether it's GPT or all other generator models or transformer models? Some people say this is just autocomplete on steroids. It's not really got any intelligence or sentience, and then that's certainly not. It's not really thinking anything through. It's basically auto-completing sentences and phrases based on what it's been trained on. That's all it's happening, autocomplete on steroids. Is that your view of what we are seeing even with GPT, or is there something more to it than that?
Yes, I think it's a reasonable way to think about systems like ChatGPT as autocomplete on steroids, right? Think about the problem. I give you the beginning of a sentence and you have to finish it. Or I give you the beginning of a document, which we call the prompt, and you have to finish it. And and by the same principle, you've looked at a lot of text in the past, like the whole web is typically what they train these things on and more. And it learns to predict what words come next. And if you do this with enough data, it can start to do things that are remarkably smart. The other key thing is this transformer architecture, which is fairly new. It's only a few years old. That is a lot more powerful than the neural networks that we had before. When you couple that with a lot of data and a lot of computing power, you get things like GPT.
Professor Domingos, if I was interviewing you a week ago, I may have said, yes, you're right, this is all autocomplete on steroids. But now, in the last 2-3 days, some of the things that GPT-4 has done for humans. For example, somebody saying, I have $100. Can you create a business model for me? Can you run a business for me? Give me instructions on how to run a business. And it seems to be doing it okay, fairly profitably so far. Now that sounds like a little bit more than just autocomplete on steroids.
It is, you can look at it as, this is actually a great illustration of both the power and the limitations of machine learning. Because in a way, you can look at it as autocomplete on steroids. Let me give you an even more extreme example. If I tell a robot, vacuum my house, right? And it vacuums my house, in a way, it's autocomplete on steroids because it's filling out the task from a very, bare bones amount of instruction, right? Now, in a way, it's more than autocomplete on steroids because at some point it takes a lot of reasoning and a lot of inference to actually figure out what to do. And there's a lot of debate within the field right now, and nobody really knows about how much does ChatGPT and the like, how much does it really understand? How much is it inferring? How much is it just regurgitating? Some people say it's just regurgitating, and that is not true. It really does compose things that were not just what it had in its data. It's easy to be fooled because sometimes something looks original, but in the billion documents that it looked at, it actually had that, but it does do more than that. Now, having said that, you also have to realize that for every example of ChatGPT doing or GPT-4 doing something brilliant, there's an example of it doing something incredibly unimaginably stupid. Stupid to a degree that no human would ever be.
Yeah, I know some fairly stupid humans as well. Now, can I ask you a question? Do you think it has already passed the Turing test? And also, the other aspect of it, that maybe it's passed the Turing test, but the Searle paradox, it doesn't really understand what it's spitting out, so it's not fully human level in that sense. What do you think?
The Turing test, if you construe it loosely enough, was actually passed before these things came along.
Yeah.
Because it's not that hard to fool a human. And by the way, things like transformers and ChatGPT and these so-called large language models started in the statistical, branch of machine learning, and they're a very old idea. They go back to the 50s. It's just that they keep getting bigger and more sophisticated.
Right.
So in a way, these things are not as new as they might seem to be. It's just that when you train them on that much data, they can start to do things that are very surprising.
You know, when you start putting GPT into things which are as basic as Word and Excel, you're probably going to see a surge in productivity. The flip side of that is everyone's going to be looking at each other and saying, this is great. What are 70% of humans going to do now? What are they going to do? There'll be some humans who will be able to figure it out. What are the others going to do?
I agree that having these algorithms, and we increasingly have them, is going to be world changing, no doubt about it. It'll change the economy, that's the most obvious one, but it will also change society. Because every time a major new technology comes along, think of the printing press, right? Society changes. Even people's ethical ideas and about how to run things and what's fair and what not changes. And AI will do that as well. And I think a lot of people haven't quite cottoned on to this yet. Now, the biggest worry that immediately comes to mind is that AI will cause a lot of jobs to disappear. And I think here the news is actually good, because in the past, people every decade have worried about the jobs that automation is going to destroy. And then in the end, it always creates more jobs. And AI is probably no different, right? 200 years ago, 98% of people in America, for example, were farmers. And then, the McCormick Reaper and whatnot came along, and now only 2% are farmers. The other 96% are not unemployed. They're just doing jobs that were completely unimaginable 200 years ago. And I would bet that the same thing is going to happen today. And I think what people really need to be thinking about is not, oh, will my job disappear? Because it's unlikely to, is what parts of my job can I do with AI and therefore be more productive and actually enjoy it more? And then better compete with the people who don't use AI. So it's not man versus machine. It's man with machine versus man without.
All right, Professor Domingo, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Look, these are exciting times. These are really fascinating times. Can I just ask you one last question? How far away do you think we are from that singularity type of AI where, it's going to take all the decisions and we'll just have to sit back and say, okay, something else is deciding for us?
First of all, it's important to realize that we're still very far from that. We've come 1,000 miles, but there's 1,000,000 miles more to go. We are still, even with things like ChatGPT, only scratching the surface of what intelligent is. So we're very far from that. But moreover, if you imagine a future, who knows how far away from now, 100 years, 50, 1,000, who knows, where AI can do everything that humans can. That does not mean that the AIs take over. We can have AIs that are extremely powerful and we still control them, right? This has to do with what AIs are technically. They have these so-called objective functions that are the goals, and then you bring all this data and computing to bear on those goals, but we can still be the ones checking those goals and stating those goals and checking the solutions. For example, if you want AI to help cure cancer, you want it to be as smart as possible. You don't want to limit its intelligence. But an AI that you've built to cause cancer isn't suddenly going to decide to kill you instead. So I think a lot of these worries that people have are more to do with, science fiction movies and our image of AIs as being like humans, when in fact AI is very different from human intelligence. It doesn't have desires, it doesn't have emotions, it doesn't have consciousness, it doesn't want to take over.
Professor Pedro Domingos, the author of The Master Algorithm. Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure talking to you. Well, like I keep telling you on this program, this is just the beginning of what artificial intelligence is capable of. We are at an inflection point in the evolution of humans and the human species in our society. And this is really a subject that you need to turn your attention to. Do think about it. And I think we've been really privileged to listen to two of the people who've literally written the books on the entire subject. So do talk about this, do share this entire episode, let people know about it, and let us know what you thought about some of what was discussed to us. Write to us on social media, tag our handles, and use the hashtag #ThisWorld. That was This World this week. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next week.